For over a century, unelected bureaucrats have quietly built a second government, one that overrules the people and operates outside the Constitution. But the documentary, American Leviathan, exposes how we got here and what it'll take to finally shatter the administrative state and restore the republic. Watch.
Americans are rightly questioning what has happened to our country. How was the duly elected president of the United States targeted by the Department of Justice and the FBI? How did the FBI and Justice Department knowingly use a fabricated dossier to lie to a federal court to secure 4 warrants in an abuse of federal power? And why was no one at the FBI, the DOJ, the courts, any federal agency or department ever held accountable or suffer consequences for these illegal acts?
Ned Ryun is the executive producer of American Leviathan, and he joins us now. So, Ned, take us through what inspired this documentary. Let's start there.
It really is a companion to the book of the same name. And it really was something that started. I was doing a lot of TV with MSNBC, CNN, the spring and summer of 2017. And I'd done a little research on progressives and some of their philosophy and realized there was something wrong. But really, as I was sitting on the sets of MSNBC and CNN and people, knowing, I think some of them were stupid enough to believe Russian collusion. But this whole hysteria about Russian collusion, it struck me, had nothing to do with anything about that. Had everything to do with about who decides. And Donald Trump showed up in January of 2017 and said, I'm the duly elected president of the United States. I'm the one who decides. And a lot of powerful bureaucrats, unelected bureaucrats inside the administrative state said, no, we think we decide. And it just became one of these things where I'm like, I'm going to start pulling the thread on this. And of course, took me back 100+ years to the beginning of the progressives' administrative state. And really what they put in place, first of all, the whole movement, progressive movement, was about destroying the moral and political authority of the Constitution, vehemently opposed to a rights-based government. And what they wanted to do was set up a massive bureaucracy filled with these powerful unelected bureaucrats, separated out from political accountability, who would do the real governing, who would do the real deciding. And the conflict between those two very different forms of government, administrative state versus constitutional republic, simmered beneath the surface for way too long because too many Republicans in D.C. accepted the premise that it was legitimate until Donald J. Trump showed up and said, no, I reject the premise. I don't think this is legitimate at all. I decide. And this administrative state has nothing to do with the Constitution. More importantly, has nothing to do with representative government. And so I wanted to do the documentary to kind of show what happened really at the beginning of Trump's first term. How did we get there? Start from the beginning and bring us up to today and really show people, Elon Musk a few weeks ago said, we're really dealing with the rule of the bureaucrat. Well, that's not a bug. That's a feature. That's exactly what the progressives wanted. And so now I think you're seeing this kind of slow epiphany with Elon Musk and others realizing, no, this isn't just about waste, fraud, and abuse. This is about a different form of government, which unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats think they decide, think they govern. And now we have a decision to make. Are we going to restore the republic, or are we just going to continue slouching towards this statist approach to government?
Ned, it's a pleasure to have you on. If people don't realize, this is a man who's been part and parcel of this movement of the last 8 to 10 years, and you've done a lot of incredible work. I'm excited to see an actual documentary. It's music to my ears on several levels. First, my Claremont brain is tingling right now with everything you're saying. You should be a Lincoln Fellow, I hope, soon, because this is exactly the story that people need to know, the true story of how we got to where we are. Talk a little bit about what needs to happen, because the first step, and I can't wait to watch this documentary, the first step is to acknowledge that this is a form of government that's antithetical to the Constitution. It was set up over the last century, and it really is directly, explicitly antithetical to what most people, especially on the right, regard as the American Republic. And people are seeing that. The scales are falling off the eyes. You're right. So what are some of the big things that need to happen in order to restore or refound America back to its roots?
So there are a couple things, Matthew, that I think people need to understand. First of all, there needs to be a moment of clarity that people need to understand, because I think a lot of people that don't live in what I call the Acela corridor or in the DC area aren't fully aware of how DC works. But this is how DC has operated, obviously, for most of the last century. And it was kind of fascinating in the documentary to hear elected officials, senators, congressmen go, yeah, the bureaucrats do the real governing here. We pass these massive 4,000 and 5,000 page bills, kind of frame stuff out, and then we send it over from the Article 1 branch that's supposed to do the governing to the Article 2 branch where the administrative state resides, and we let the bureaucrats with their statutes and regulations do the governing. And most elected officials are fine with that because it helps them avoid the really hard decisions that might prevent them from being reelected. They go home and tell their constituents, oh, I can't believe that bureaucrat did it. I'm going to go back to D.C. I'm going to fight for you, and I'll make sure this never happens, as they continue to blindly fund the administrative state and empower these bureaucrats. So there has to be a moment of clarity for the American people, because I think at the end of the day, and I'm quoting Phil Hamburger here, in which he says, the spirit of liberty must arise in the American people again, and they have to instill in Congress and the president and their judges this desire to actually restore the republic and end administrative power. And the American people have to understand, and I think they're having a bit of an awakening over the last 7-8 weeks, especially as Elon and DOGE start to dig in on some of this stuff with the rule of the bureaucrat and out of control, just spending and funding of anti-American, I would argue, anti-American projects. But that administrative power revives absolute power and is a massive threat, not only to our civil liberties, but to our prosperity moving forward. So the American people have to demand of their elected officials, yeah, you actually have to govern. You actually have to pull back that unconstitutionally subdelegated power from these bureaucrats. And then you've got to actually have the moral and political courage in the White House at the head of the executive branch, which Donald Trump has in spades, for him to understand and to really enact a plan, obviously through Elon and DOGE, that we have to dismantle and deconstruct the administrative state. And Matthew, there's 800,000 non-essential federal employees, and that's defined by the government. That's not something Elon and Trump came up with. So if we don't end up with 800,000 fewer federal employees by the time we're done, I think it's been a failure. And then we have to remove those positions from the roles. And most importantly, there has to be accountability. The congressional, the members of Congress, first of all, have to say, we will do the governing. Also, we demand accountability. When we give you money, we actually expect to have real oversight, and you will give us transparency and accountability and tell us how this money is being spent on behalf of the American people. So DC is deeply broken. DC does not operate how people, maybe if they're under an illusion that it's a constitutional republic and a government of, by, and for the people, hate to break it to you if you haven't noticed, that's not at all how DC works. So moment of clarity, and then demand we return to restoration of the republic. And then hopefully pray to God that Trump and Elon Musk are very successful in this deconstruction and devolving and quite frankly, shattering the administrative state. Because Matthew, yeah, I think it all started with, hey, let's go after waste, fraud, and abuse, which I always thought was the poisonous fruit. Yeah. And I think Elon's starting to realize, oh, that is the poisonous fruit of a poisonous tree. Maybe we should actually go after the tree, cut it down, shatter it to a million pieces, uproot it, make it cease to exist. So that's where I hope we end up.
I want to go more into shattering it into a million pieces, because I feel like when I was growing up, sitting around the dinner table, my parents would always say, stop funding the government, that they hate you, right? You can't keep giving money at the government level to all of these programs that are going against the will of the American people. And you have to stop funding it before anything else is going to change. So you can see why I ended up here. But you look at this and then bring that for us, Ned, into present day with the freak out that we're kind of seeing right now as people are starting to pull the funding for some of these programs for not only just the people that hate us, but also for like the transing of the mice and, you know, Sesame Street over in the Middle East and all of the crazy things that we've seen.
But that's what happens when you have unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats who refuse to be transparent and refuse to have accountability. At a certain point, we're all imperfect human beings. We're going to do many times what we can, not what we should. And this is what happens. But, you know, the thing that's interesting to me about what's taking place with what Elon and DOGE are doing. Yeah, I've been in D.C. for over 20 years now, and obviously have seen a lot of these problems up close and realize there's huge problems. We're obviously not a constitutional republic. But I even think I've been kind of staggered by what DOGE is uncovering, in which I have come to the conclusion that I think a lot of what is taking place inside of our government right now is just a massive money laundering machine for the left, in which they're taking American taxpayer dollars, to fund their pet projects, to fund their allies, to advance policies outside of the legislative process. But even more so, I mean, even look at the religious charities that got so much government funding to actually put the illegal immigration over the last 4 years on steroids. Our taxpayer dollars are being used by this money laundering machine to advance anti-American, policies that really are about the destruction of this country. So it's kind of been pretty interesting to watch what's taking place over the last 7-8 weeks and realize, yeah, this is far more serious than even I imagined.
Yeah, what's great about it is, they've been raiding the Treasury for a long time, and it's gotten worse every year. Yeah. As you had the CRs come out. It slowly, it dawned on everyone, I think, wait a minute, we can do whatever we want. No one's watching, and it gets worse and worse and worse every day that goes by. But what's interesting about DOGE and its popularity speaks to the importance of this documentary. Elon Musk is a rock star like figure, like Trump. I mean, he already was a celebrity. And DOGE is a hilarious concept. It's great marketing. And so here you have a sort of educatory process. I mean, look, man, I used to pray for some politician. I mean, even Trump the first time, start explaining to people what is actually happening, right, in an organized fashion over time, like a media campaign. Right. And then while you press for certain things, in the legislature, it's not rocket science. Those of us in media and politics can tell you. And here you have almost the perfect media campaign, right, to educate the entire world about what's going on with someone at the top of his game in the the names you recognize. You can say his first name or last name, and you know who he is. But that speaks to the importance of what you're doing here with the documentary, because my Claremont brain tingled, right, but my heart is in, we have to have this stuff on video, is smart media that explains to people this is what's really going on. And it can't be a bunch of idiot talking heads. It can't be conservative grift, I like media or whatever. It needs to be people, it's exactly like we're trying to do here, who lay together, here's the whole story, here's what's going on. So talk a little bit about making this, because it's really important that we see more of what you're doing. And we all know how hard it is on the right to find funding and actually do these things and get them right. And they're hard on themselves, right? I feel like a lot of us who are good with word cells, we can write books, right? But you want to translate that onto camera, that's a whole different ballgame.
Totally. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Let's just say documentaries are a lot harder than they look, which I was like, this should be easy. I'm just going to so it doesn't really follow the book. It does a little bit because I wanted to expand above and beyond that. But I'm like, I've kind of got a narrative already with the book, and this should be fairly straightforward and simple. Having the correct narrative arc. I mean, we did probably 8 or 9 hours of footage. How do you compress that into 62 minutes? Because I didn't want it to be too long. How do you get into 62 minutes, keep the right narrative, keep it sharp, keep it to the point, and at the same time not cut out anything that's essential to that narrative? A lot harder than it looks. And then, getting everybody lined up to actually do the interviews. Thankfully, Jim Banks, who's the new rock star senator out of Indiana, Rick Scott, Marsha Blackburn, Chip Roy was awesome. And then a lot of people that have been in D.C. and observed a lot of this. Rachel Bovard was amazing. Just getting them all situated and getting the interviews and then doing the cutting and the splicing and the B-roll. Yeah, it was a little bit harder than I thought it would be, but I'm glad we did it. I think we really got to a good place before we launched, and it's given me a lot of ideas for future documentaries. But yeah, it was a lot harder than it looked, but we pulled it off somehow.
All right. So with all that hard work, Ned, where can people find it? The most important question.
So if you're on X, it's my pinned tweet. You can go to Ned Ryun, NEDRYUN. You can watch it there. Or if you're not on X, go to AmericanLeviathan.com, and you can watch it there for free as well. I wanted to be able to do this, again, in a concise way to show people what's going on and do it for free so that people can watch it, be illuminated, have clarity, and then hopefully share it with as many people as possible so that we can actually get this conversation going on a national level.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to put that on my weekend to-do list.